A deck of cards. I will immodestly confess to being quite the skilled card player. There are exceptionally few card games which I don't know, and a great deal of those I'm practically a master at. What makes card games so fascinating is that every game of the thousands you can play with cards involves three key factors. The first is luck. No matter what skill level you have, the way the cards are dealt are more or less just a matter of chance. Even professional card counters can tell you that sometimes things don't go the way they expected to. There's a miscalculation, a simple dealing error, or a card you were expecting to be further down the deck unfortunately shows up near the top. Luck is always a factor in these games. And in many games, not most, but many, it is the chief factor. It's not something that can be combated, but you can mitigate the damage with the second key. The second key is strategy. Poker, rummy, blackjack, these all appear to be simple games of chance. But when you've played long enough, you develop your own style. Are you aggressive, accepting losses in order to get the big payout in the end? Are you conservative, not surrendering a stable footing for an uncertain and potentially pricey risk? Each game calls for different strategies, and this is often dictated by your opponent. Which brings us to the final key, your ability to bluff. Any poker player knows this is true. You're not playing the cards, you're playing the opponent. Every day in Vegas there is some ballsy contender, or more often some stoic dealer, who's winning the pot on crap hands by the power of sheer psychological warfare. Don't believe me? Look up Jack Strauss, the man who pulled off one of the greatest poker bluffs of all time. The guy convinced his opponent to give up a fortune in a Texas Hold'em match, because he convinced his opponent that he had a pocket pair, when in reality, he had one of the worst hands you can get. Now that's nothing to turn your nose up at. That is a brilliant bit of bluffing, and using the opponent's own keen mind against them. No need to plant ideas when you know how your opponent is going to think. That is partly why I find the game so fascinating. If you're a real psychological whiz kid, you can skate through the game on some shithole cards. I give you this brief introduction not to showcase how brilliant I am, though you are certainly free to think so. I explain this to you because my fascination with cards led me to search through the internet for a game that I haven't played yet, and I found a rich tapestry of worldly card games. Canasta, which originated in Uruguay, became a sensation in the US around the mid-1950s. Double Sir, a Pakistani variation of Trumps. Macau, the Romanian version of Crazy Eights. There's no limit to what a properly equipped deck of cards can do. Some games require a 40-card French deck, others a 54-card Tarek deck. Some games use custom pinochle decks, but those aside, your standard 52-card deck can be used for a lot of fun. And then there's other games you can play. I stumbled across this one completely by chance. I won't tell you where I discovered it, you'll just have to take my word. Suffice to say that through a bit of digging, I found a game that you can play with a spirit. The game doesn't have a name, though it was affectionately referred to as the wager game. Because you have to understand the circumstances of what I intend to tell you. I'm going to provide you the details of how this game is played. I strongly urge you not to play this game. Remember the three keys I mentioned at the beginning of the story? Well, the wager game is the absolute pinnacle of these properties. To start, you need a standard deck of cards, that is a 52 deck. Be damn sure you remove the jokers before you start playing. If it were me, though it doesn't explicitly state this anywhere in the ritual, I would make sure that the jokers as well as any other decks of cards around are not anywhere near where you intend to play. I can't say for certain, but I suspect they like to cheat. You can play on any surface, but a table is preferred. You want to make sure that the area is clean of obstructions, and that you can deal the cards efficiently without them sliding all over the place. You don't want any food or drink present. This isn't a fucking party. Having these present will usually be seen as an insult, and I'm not exactly sure what would happen. The great thing about this ritual, if you can call it great, is that there isn't really much setup. No arcane chanting, no laundry list of supplies. All you need is your deck of cards and your nerve. When you're ready to play, you need to turn out any unnecessary lighting. You should be able to see the faces of the cards, of course, but just barely. Candlelight usually does the trick, but other than that, you need it to be dark. Set the deck of cards in front of you, between you and the spot where he will be playing. I should probably mention that if the spot is in any way obstructed, he won't show up. Don't worry, he won't pop out of the walls and drag you to hell or anything like that. He just won't appear. Make sure your guest can comfortably sit. If you're sitting at a table, leave a chair for him. If you're on the floor, again, not recommended, make sure there's equal amount of space for him as you. Use your judgment for the best results. The game is played as follows. You're playing with the spirit. There won't be some flash of light or spectral whispering to indicate that he's arrived. You'll know. You'll know when he's there. If you do hear something, turn on the lights and get the hell out of there. Do not attempt to play this game again in that exact same spot. You see, the tricky thing is, you never really know who your opponent is going to be. Some opponents will play fair. Others will do anything in order to win. You don't want to play with a hostile opponent. You just won't win. Once your docile guest has arrived, you deal each other 3 cards. Do not look at your guest cards. Don't cheat. Deal them face down. Your guest will know exactly what cards he has to play. From this point on, the game becomes rather subjective. The source didn't exactly explain step-by-step rules. There is no scoring. You're just kind of betting. You're betting things precious to you against the spirit, and the spirit is in turn betting something that you would want. I forgot that part, didn't I? Yes. Why would you want to play this game when you don't know the stakes? You see, this game, like many other means of communicating with ethereal entities, is supposed to give you, primarily, knowledge. This version requires just less setup. It becomes a challenging battle of wits. Just beware. You don't have any knowledge that the spirit doesn't, so you don't have anything to wager in that category. What you're wagering is a variety of lovely punishments, which are revealed by the turn of the card. It could be something as simple as destroying a cherished possession, to as horrible as committing acts of violence. If you're lucky, you'll only destroy your own life. You begin by playing one of the 3 cards. You choose the card from your hand. I'll explain what the cards do at the end. But suffice to say, your guest will always have the advantage of reaction. However, both of you can only play the cards you have in front of you. When the exchange is over, you deal him the first card, it's common courtesy, and then deal yourself one. Neither side should ever have more than 3 cards in front of them. Discard used cards in a pile to the side of the deck. Now, I imagine you're wondering, how does he select his card? Well, it all depends on your opponent. Some simply move the card closer to you. Some might whisper the answer in your ear in a voice that you could swear was just your imagination. Some might just flat out hand you the card. But if your opponent is ever that forward, I strongly suggest that you stop playing. Immediately. Which brings us to the ending. The ritual. Another great thing about this ritual is that you can quit whenever you want. Simply turn over the cards remaining in the deck, if any, face up, then turn on the lights. You should remain safe, though your experience in the game will give you a better idea of that. If you don't feel safe, leave the place you played and don't come back for a few days. Usually the spirit will have moved on by that point. Now I'll explain what the cards do. There are a few exceptions which I will note at the end. Well, meanwhile, here's what the cards do. The suits do not matter. Aces are your best friend. These act as a protection against whatever the spirit wants you to do. Just be cautious about using these. Remember, you go first and the spirit will, if they're able to, use a weaker punishment in retaliation. Unfortunately, aces are also the spirit's best friend. When they select an ace, you must turn over the other 2 cards and perform the actions without any chance to block, even if you have an ace in your own hand. Deal the spirit 3 new cards after these are performed. In the unlikely event that 2 aces meet, neither party is obligated to do anything. You can perform this move to determine the friendliness of your opponent. It's a rather selfless thing for the spirit to do, but remember, it all could be a bluff. 2 through 10 can be viewed as severity. For you, it refers to the amount of information you can ask. Like, I'd say this too is greatly subjective, and much more is revealed about the nature of the game by playing it yourself. But for instance, if you play a 2, don't go asking winning lottery numbers. If you're wondering, I wouldn't ask with anything less than an 8. With a 2, you can pretty much just ask what tomorrow's weather's gonna be. For the spirit, as you may have guessed, it refers to pain. A 2 would be the equivalent of pricking yourself with a needle, and a 10 would be pouring hot oil down your back. But don't worry, you don't have to perform these violent actions on yourself. You see, the reason the spirit plays the game is to not just cause you torment, but to see what kind of player you are. If you would do these actions to another, well, they rather enjoy that. Emotional damage is also acceptable, but again, use your judgment. This is just an example. A 2 would be tearing up a photo of a deceased loved one. A 10 would be disavowing your own children. Some spirits prefer this to physical pain, but trust me, those are the ones you have to watch out for. A bit of strategy on this one. In my experience playing the game, I found that most spirits, even hostile ones, have a bit of an honor code about this. If they are able to match you number for number, occasionally they're 1 higher or 1 lower, but essentially they try to make it worth your while. Make sure the answers you want are equivalent to the damage you have to cause. You see? Of course, if you find a spirit that plays a low card on a high number card question, maybe you're better off not knowing the answer. A final note before I move on. Spirits cannot lie about the answers they give you. They might be mistaken if you ask something out of their knowledge, but they are generally bound to answer the questions as truthfully as possible. They can bluff the cards, not the answers. Jacks are prank cards. No, this isn't as fun as it sounds. This is a card where even if you draw it, you lose something. When either you or the spirit plays the card, the spirit plays a prank on you. If the spirit is benign, it might be something as simple as something goes missing and turns up in an odd place. That is the best you can hope for. If the spirit is malignant, however, then you're gonna get the piss scared out of you. The spirit can take any number of monstrous forms, perform any unspeakable act, with the general exception of physically harming you. But trust me, that limitation only makes them more hell-bent on getting you. The worst part is, they don't have to do it right away. They can wait for later, even after the ritual is over. So don't think about using any protection rituals. They're not going to work. But remember, they can't physically hurt you, so at least there's that. Queens are universally the worst card that can be played. Honestly, if a queen is dealt, your best bet is to stop playing and just get up and leave. And I don't mean go into a neighbor's house or something like that. I mean get as far away as you possibly can. This is, mind you, if the spirit plays the card. If you play the card, the queen acts as just a throwaway card. Be glad you drew it and not the spirit. But it does nothing. It essentially gives the spirit a free pass to do whatever they want. You might not think to play it, and that's your right, but hoarding queens is also potentially problematic. I'll explain why in one of the exceptions. What the Queen does when a spirit plays it is breaks the boundary between you two. The spirit now has license to harm you, to haunt you, to follow you to the ends of the earth. Your best bet is trying to get a head start, but I can't guarantee that that'll work. Kings are free passes. Not much to say here. If you play a king card, you can play another card uninterrupted by the spirit, and the spirit can do the same if they play it. An ideal strategy for those seeking information is to pair a king with a 10 and play them together. This will guarantee you get whatever burning question answered, and then you can simply stop playing. However, I don't recommend doing this on your first turn. If you are lucky enough to get that hand, not letting the spirit play will likely anger them. And again, I don't know what could happen. Finally, a few exceptions. First, there's the 2 of clubs. If you play hearts, you recognize that this is the starting card. Playing this is beneficial, especially if you play it during the beginning. The response card will not be an action you have to do yourself, but will truthfully assess your opponent. If they respond with a lower number, they're most likely a benign entity. If they respond with a higher card, well, that's unfortunate. When a spirit plays this card, it functions as a normal 2. Next would be the Suicide King. This is unpleasant. Not the worst card, arguably, but not pleasant. This card is murder. If you play it, it merely functions as a free pass. But if the spirit plays it, you are obligated to either murder somebody or commit suicide. Again, the choice is yours. This is a horrible affair, of course, but spirits, generally benign spirits, will accept a tribute in place of an actual murder. But it will be something painful, horrible beyond anything you might do with an ordinary 10. It will be something that will cripple you for life. And yes, if you opt out of murder, you must perform this tribute to yourself. Finally, the Queen of Spades. This is the ultimate chance card. It turns over all of your opponent's cards. If they have a queen, you must simply discard these cards, redeal, and move on. If they don't have a queen, then you'd better start running. Don't bother ending the ritual. Just run. Because you've given the spirit the power of a queen, and done so willingly. If you're caught by the spirit, again, you can imagine. Suffice to say that no one is going to find you. At this point, I should probably warn you that reneging on something that the spirit has played, refusing to follow through with any of the torment or murder that was ordered, has an effect. If you lose the wager, cut your losses. If the spirit plays this card, it has the same effect, but the results are the opposite. If you weren't hanging on to any queens, then praise whatever entity you worship because you're free of the effects of the queen, and can continue playing safely. If, however, you were hoarding queens because you didn't want them to play, and leave yourself exposed, don't bother running. You have already lost everything. The realm in which you spend the rest of your days it's supposed to make hell look hospitable, warming. This is the wager game, in all of its occult glory. I recommend against playing this despite my own experience with it. Playing against the spirit is a thrill, and the few times I successfully bluff, one of them is rewarding. I know exactly when to play the cards and when to avoid the pitfalls. Luck is certainly a factor, as is my own strategy and my own brilliance at bluffing. However, I have had the misfortune to get overzealous and make a few mistakes. I played the Queen of Spades in my last game, and my opponent didn't have any queens of his own. I miscounted and made a very poor guess about my opponent. He had bluffed me. He's been following me for a few nights now. Every time I think I get rid of him, I see him right on my tail, in the window of the car beside me on the highway at night, a shadowy figure in the mirror that I only see for a split second. I'm putting this on here to warn you not to play this game, just in case you were ever to stumble across a game on some website. I'm one of the greatest card players of all time, and I lost. What possible hope could you have? I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the lovely patrons listed on screen: Dan R., Cody V., Chaos X, Paul Z., Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, Pyromancer, Hayden MH, Ethan A., and Dark Side of the Bear. Guys, thank you so much. If you want access to some Patreon-only content, I'm going to try to do 2 or 3 stories this month. I already got the first one out. And some other perks. You can go on Patreon and check out which tier offers what perks. But go do that. Thank you very much.